He brought chaos into every scene he touched. Standing just 4 feet 10 inches tall, Danny DeVito had a presence that completely filled a room. Hollywood never quite knew where to place him, but Danny always knew exactly who he was. What the cameras never showed wasn't the fame or the success. It was a woman from Brooklyn who walked into a small theater in 1971 and couldn't take her eyes off the man on stage. She believed in him long before the rest of the world did. At 81, Danny DeVito finally said it openly. She was the love of his life. His journey is about much more than movies. It's a story of hardship, determination, and a relationship that survived even after it changed shape. Born on November 17, 1944, in Neptune, New Jersey, Danny grew up feeling like the world had already decided he didn't fit the usual mold. His mother, Julia, was 40 years old when he was born and had already raised several children. Years later, she admitted, "I didn't want him, but I'm so proud of him." Those words stayed with him. The rejection and the pride existed side by side, and Danny carried both throughout his life. That feeling of not fully belonging never disappeared. He learned to use it as motivation, but it remained part of him. His father owned a candy shop in Asbury Park and was known as a kind man. But when alcohol entered the picture, life at home became much harder. Danny learned to recognize the warning signs early. Sometimes he hid, sometimes he went to neighbors for safety. Police were called to the family home numerous times during his childhood. Those experiences left lasting marks that stayed with him for years. He was also born with a rare genetic condition called Fairbanks disease, which affected his growth and caused constant physical pain. The condition impacted his joints, hips, knees, and back. By his 20s, pain had become part of everyday life. Hollywood encouraged him not to talk about it. Struggling actors weren't supposed to show weakness. So he stayed quiet and pushed forward. In New York, he shared a tiny apartment with Michael Douglas. Money was always tight. They survived on cheap meals, split the cost of headshots, and walked all over the city looking for opportunities. While Douglas started landing roles, Danny kept hearing no. He worked wherever he could. He parked cars. He stood in store windows pretending to be a mannequin. For a period, he even lived out of his Volkswagen Beetle and relied on YMCA showers. Few people knew how difficult those years really were. The industry constantly pressured him to change. One studio reportedly offered him a huge amount of money to alter his appearance and become more acceptable to mainstream audiences. Danny refused. He reportedly burned the contract and stayed committed to being himself. "I'd rather be a first-rate version of myself than a second-rate version of someone else," he told a casting director. He meant every word. By 1970, Danny was 26 years old. He had endured rejection after rejection while dealing with physical pain and carrying emotional scars from childhood. He was still standing, but he had not yet experienced what it felt like to be truly seen by someone. That changed on January 17, 1971. The play was called The Shrinking Bride, a small off-Broadway production in New York City. Nothing about it suggested it would become a life-changing night. Rhea Perlman attended only because a friend was in the cast. Born and raised in Brooklyn, she was the daughter of a Polish immigrant and had studied drama at Hunter College. Like many young performers, she balanced auditions with restaurant work while trying to build a career. She was smart, funny, and confident without demanding attention. As she watched the performance, one actor immediately stood out. He wasn't a traditional leading man, but he completely controlled the stage. Something about Danny's energy grabbed her attention. The timing, the confidence, the way he owned the room made her forget why she had come. When the show ended, she asked if he had a girlfriend. He didn't. She wasn't interested in waiting around for introductions. Years later, she laughed while recalling it. "I had to meet him immediately. I came onto him big time." After the performance, they went out to eat and talked for hours. For Danny, who had spent years hearing reasons he wasn't enough, it was a powerful moment. Here was a woman who saw something special in him right away. He later said he knew within 22 minutes that she was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. Not a possibility. Maybe not. The woman. Just 2 weeks later, Rhea moved into his Manhattan apartment. It happened fast, but it felt natural. They came from similar working-class backgrounds, shared big dreams, and understood the struggle of building a life from scratch. They lived together for 11 years before getting married, not because they doubted the relationship, but because they already knew what they meant to each other. Meanwhile, Danny's friendship with Michael Douglas continued opening doors. In 1975, Douglas was producing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and pushed for Danny to be cast as Martini, a role he had previously played on stage. There was resistance. Some wanted a bigger name. Douglas stood firm and Danny got the part. His screen time lasted less than 6 minutes, but audiences remembered him. The film became a massive success, winning 5 Academy Awards and putting Danny firmly on Hollywood's radar. Then, in 1978, he made a decision many people considered career suicide. Danny turned down several film opportunities for the chance to audition for a television sitcom called Taxi. That choice would change everything. His own agent told him not to do it, but Danny had already made up his mind. He had read the script, and just like the moment he first met Rhea, he felt something immediately. The role was Louis De Palma, a dispatcher who was rude, selfish, and completely unapologetic. Danny walked into the audition and delivered a 7-minute monologue that reportedly left the room silent. ABC executives were nervous and questioned whether audiences would accept him in the role. But creator James L. Brooks believed in Danny so strongly that he reportedly threatened to quit if the network refused to cast him. In the end, Danny got the role. He even signed the contract without negotiating, despite being paid significantly less than some of the other actors. He didn't care. He knew this opportunity could change everything. Then something happened that surprised almost everyone involved with the show. During the second season of Taxi, Rhea joined the cast as Zena Sherman, Louis' girlfriend. The producers had no idea Danny and Rhea had already been living together for years. They assumed the chemistry between them was simply the result of talented performers doing their jobs. It was great acting, no doubt about that. But it was also the natural connection of two people who knew each other on a level very few couples ever reach. Their scenes worked because the bond audiences were seeing wasn't manufactured. It had already been built over years of shared experiences, struggles, and dreams. In January 1982, after 11 years together, Danny and Rhea quietly got married. There was no giant Hollywood spectacle, no flashy headlines, and no massive production surrounding the ceremony. They simply made official what had already existed for more than a decade. That same year, Rhea's career exploded when she landed the role of Carla Tortelli on Cheers. Her sharp tongue, quick wit, and unforgettable personality made Carla one of television's most beloved characters. The role earned Rhea 4 Emmy Awards and turned her into a household name across America. What stood out was how Danny talked about her success. There was never any jealousy or competition. Instead, he spoke with genuine admiration. Every award she won seemed to make him just as happy as if he had won it himself. The respect between them was obvious, and it became one of the strongest foundations of their relationship. While their acting careers continued to grow, they quietly launched Jersey Films in 1983. What began as a side project eventually became one of the most influential independent production companies in Hollywood. Over the years, the company helped bring major films to life, including Pulp Fiction, Aaron Brockovich, Out of Sight, and Garden State. Their influence extended far beyond acting, allowing them to support creative voices that larger studios often overlooked. The story behind Pulp Fiction says a lot about how Danny and Rhea approached business. At a time when other studios were hesitant, they helped keep Quentin Tarantino's project alive. Their team provided support, office space, and resources when the filmmaker needed people willing to believe in his vision. Tarantino promised he could make an $8 million film look like a $25 million production. When the movie finally arrived, he delivered exactly what he promised, and the rest became Hollywood history. At the same time, Danny and Rhea were raising a family. Their daughter Lucy was born in 1983, Grace followed in 1985, and Jacob arrived in 1987. Despite their demanding schedules, they maintained a rule that revealed a lot about how they viewed their relationship. No matter how busy life became, they wouldn't allow more than 2 weeks to pass without working on something creative together. They weren't focused on maintaining appearances or creating a perfect public image. They simply enjoyed building things side by side and staying connected through shared projects. One of the best examples of that partnership arrived with Matilda in 1996. Danny directed the film while playing the outrageous Mr. Wormwood, and Rhea appeared as his equally outrageous wife. Their children even made small appearances in the movie. To audiences, it looked like a fun family collaboration. But behind the scenes, something much more meaningful was taking place. The film's young star, Mara Wilson, was dealing with the heartbreaking reality of her mother's battle with cancer during production. Danny and Rhea quietly stepped in to support her. They didn't seek attention for it and didn't make public statements about their kindness. They simply helped. As Mara later recalled, they provided comfort during one of the most difficult periods of her life. Before filming Wrapped, Danny even arranged for an early screening of the movie so Mara's mother could watch it before she passed away. Years later, Mara described Danny and Rhea as being like her favorite aunt and uncle. It was a gesture she never forgot and one that revealed a side of Danny few people ever saw. That was the part of his story that posters and award nominations couldn't capture. On screen, he often played loud, intimidating, or outrageous characters. Off-screen, many people described him as loyal, generous, and deeply compassionate. The contrast between his public image and private actions made him even more remarkable. Then came October 2012. After more than 40 years together and 30 years of marriage, Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman announced they were separating. The news stunned fans. In an industry where relationships often seem temporary, Danny and Rhea represented something different. They weren't selling a fantasy. They weren't performing for cameras. They seemed like two real people who had built a real life together, and many people had come to admire that authenticity. Years later, Rhea spoke openly about the separation during an appearance on Julia Louis-Dreyfus's podcast, Wiser Than Me. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it," she said. "It was very difficult at first. There were a lot of reasons that we separated." She explained that both of them were extremely ambitious and deeply committed to their careers. "He loves to work. I like to work," she said. Some details remained private, and she made it clear that certain parts of their story belonged only to them. But what became obvious was that the affection between them never completely disappeared. By March 2013, only months after announcing the separation, reports suggested they had reconciled and were trying again. They attended therapy together and reportedly participated in dozens of sessions. Danny even rented the same restaurant where they had shared one of their earliest dates. For a while, it appeared they had found their way back to each other. They spent several more years together before separating again in 2017. Yet even after that second separation, they still never divorced. When Rhea was asked in 2018 why they hadn't formally ended the marriage, her answer was refreshingly honest. "We've been together a very long time, so there's a lot of love and history," she said. "We agree on enough things, so why ruin that with the yucky things that come with a divorce?" That response perfectly captured how their relationship had evolved. It no longer fit the traditional definition of marriage, but it remained deeply important to both of them. Danny eventually bought a home less than a mile away from Rhea's. They continued talking every day, meeting regularly, and spending time together with their children and grandchildren. Their son even revealed that they shared a Netflix account and often texted each other while watching the same shows from separate houses. It was an unusual arrangement, but it clearly worked for them. When Danny was asked about Rhea during a 2024 interview, he didn't hesitate. "We're doing great," he said. "We see each other all the time. Yesterday was Lucy's birthday. We were all together for the party. We're a tight family." Then he added something that revealed even more about their bond. "You know, Rhea and I met in 1971. We've been together for that long, and you grow together. It's like you really know how each other's feeling all the time. We participate in conversation daily. That isn't how most people talk about someone they stopped loving. It sounds much more like two people whose relationship changed form, but never truly disappeared. The connection remained, even if the circumstances looked different than before." In 2019, when Rhea appeared on Watch What Happens Live, Andy Cohen directly asked whether she and Danny would ever divorce. Her response was immediate. "What for?" she said. Two simple words, yet they seemed to explain everything. Then, in 2022, she shared a reflection that stopped many people in their tracks. "Sometimes I wish we were still together because those were the glory days, but these are other kinds of glory days." It's a simple sentence, but there's an entire lifetime of love, friendship, loyalty, and understanding hidden inside those words. Their story may not have followed the traditional Hollywood script, but that's exactly what makes it so unforgettable. In 2025, Danny finally began speaking publicly about Fairbanks disease in a way he never had before. But the focus wasn't on himself. Instead, he used his platform to bring attention to people living with the condition every day, especially families struggling to afford treatment and individuals dealing with chronic pain without much support. For years, he had quietly donated millions toward research into bone disorders. Reports suggested the total exceeded $12 million, and much of it was given without publicity, without announcements, and without any effort to draw attention to himself. Danny cared far more about results than recognition, and that approach reflected the way he had lived much of his life. At the same time, he began speaking more openly about the pressure he faced throughout his career. Hollywood repeatedly encouraged him to change his appearance, to become more physically conventional, and to fit a version of success that others thought audiences would accept more easily. The pressure followed him for decades, but his response never changed. "I'd rather be a first-rate version of myself than a second-rate version of someone else." It was more than a quote. It was the philosophy that guided his entire life. He said it when he was young, struggling, and sleeping in a Volkswagen while chasing acting jobs. More than half a century later, he was still saying the exact same thing. When you look back at his journey, a clear pattern starts to emerge. The burned contract. The painful days he worked through without complaint. The opportunities he risked losing by refusing to change who he was. The charitable giving that happened quietly behind the scenes. All of those moments connect to a deeper story. And at the center of that story stands a woman who walked into a small theater one January night, forgot about the friend she had originally come to see, and couldn't take her eyes off the man performing on stage. Long before awards, fame, or Hollywood success arrived, Rhea Perlman saw something special in Danny. She believed in him before he had the accomplishments people usually point to as proof. While others focused on what made him different, she focused on who he was. Years later, she would still laugh when telling the story of how boldly she approached him after the show. 2 weeks later, she moved into his apartment. Decades passed, careers changed, and their relationship evolved, but in many ways, she never truly left. At 81, Danny DeVito remains as active as ever. He continues working on new projects, including documentary productions with members of his family, and he still plays Frank Reynolds on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, a role he took on in 2006 when the series was still fighting for survival. He joined when the show needed a boost, and he never walked away. That loyalty seems to be one of the defining traits of his life. Whether it's family, friendships, or professional commitments, Danny has always had a reputation for showing up and staying when it matters most. The same can be said about his connection with Rhea. They still speak every day. They still spend time together regularly. They still share family celebrations and remain deeply involved in each other's lives. While their relationship may not fit the traditional picture many people expect, it clearly works for them. In the ways that matter most, they remain partners, friends, and family. When Danny was asked what Rhea meant to his life, he answered the way he usually does when discussing something deeply important. He didn't reach for dramatic words or grand speeches. Instead, he kept it simple. "We have 3 beautiful children, and now we have grandchildren. The family's growing. We participate in conversation daily." No elaborate declaration, no attempt to impress anyone. Just a straightforward description of a connection that has lasted more than 5 decades. Sometimes the simplest words carry the most meaning. Danny DeVito spent much of his life being told he wasn't enough. He refused to change. He kept moving forward through rejection, pain, and obstacles that would have stopped many people. He gave generously without demanding applause, and stayed true to himself when it would have been easier to compromise. Through all those years, the woman who once thought he was the most fascinating person in the room remained part of his story. Today, they may live in different homes, but the conversation never stopped. The friendship never disappeared. The history never faded. Their story serves as a reminder that not every lasting relationship follows the path people expect. Sometimes the strongest bonds aren't defined by labels or appearances. Sometimes they are defined by loyalty, respect, shared history, and the simple decision to keep showing up for each other year after year. And for Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman, that may be the most remarkable chapter of all. Danny DeVito's story isn't just about Hollywood success, blockbuster movies, or becoming one of the most recognizable actors of his generation. It's about staying true to yourself when the world keeps telling you to change. It's about refusing to let rejection define your future. And maybe most of all, it's about finding someone who sees your value long before anyone else does. For decades, Danny was told he didn't fit the mold. He wasn't the typical leading man. He didn't look the way studios wanted him to look. He faced challenges most people never knew about and carried physical pain that rarely made headlines. Yet, he kept going. He built a remarkable career, helped create some of the most influential films of his era, raised a family he clearly treasures, and never abandoned the principles that guided him from the beginning. And through all those years, one constant remained: Rhea Perlman. Their relationship didn't follow the script Hollywood usually writes. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't conventional, and it didn't always look the way people expected it to look. But perhaps that's exactly why so many people find it inspiring. They built a connection that survived success, setbacks, separation, changing circumstances, and the passage of more than 50 years. Even when life took them in different directions, the respect, affection, and friendship never disappeared. In a world where relationships are often judged by appearances, Danny and Rhea's story offers a different perspective. Sometimes love isn't measured by living under the same roof or fitting into someone else's definition of what a relationship should be. Sometimes it's measured by loyalty, shared history, daily conversations, and simply continuing to show up for one another no matter what life brings. Maybe that's why their story resonates with so many people. It reminds us that the strongest relationships aren't always the loudest ones. They aren't always the ones that make headlines. Sometimes they're built quietly over decades through trust, understanding, forgiveness, and an unbreakable sense of connection. As Danny himself once suggested, some people spend their entire lives searching for the right person. He found Rhea on a January night in 1971. More than half a century later, in many ways, they're still finding each other. And perhaps that's the real lesson hidden inside this incredible story. The most meaningful relationships aren't always about holding on tightly. Sometimes they're about never completely letting go. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the lives, careers, and untold stories of your favorite stars. And let us know in the comments. Do you think Danny and Rhea's relationship is proof that love can exist beyond traditional definitions? We'd love to hear your thoughts.